Have you ever been the person everyone depends on? The one who keeps showing up, keep pushing through, keep saying, I'm fine, until one day your body starts saying something totally different. Maybe it's exhaustion that the sleep doesn't fix. Maybe it's the pain that keeps returning. Maybe it's inflammation, brain fog, hormonal changes, or feeling like the version of yourself you used to know is starting to slip away. And the hardest part, you keep searching for answers, but you're still wondering in the back of your mind, why does my body feel like it's working against me? Here's what so many women are never told. Your body usually doesn't stop communicating overnight. It whispers before it screams. And sometimes the very patterns that helped you survive, being strong, pushing harder, doing more, ignoring your own needs, are the patterns your body can no longer carry. Your symptoms may be physical, but the pattern is often deeper. Today, we're exploring what happens when your body finally asks you to stop fighting it and start listening differently. But before we dive into this episode, y'all already know what time it is. Bye with me, y'all. Welcome to the Empowered Plates, Empowered Lives podcast. Y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Empowered Place, Empowered Lives podcast. It's your healthy habits and lifestyle coach, Jovonnie, helping women uncover their hidden patterns contributing to pain, fatigue, inflammation, and survival mode so they can rebuild trust with their body again. And today's guest is someone who understands what happens when your body forces you to rewrite your story. Miguel Bautista went from athlete and high performer to being bedridden and searching for answers after years of unexplained symptoms. After rebuilding his own health, he created CFS Recovery and has helped thousands of people around the world better understand chronic fatigue, nervous system patterns, and what it means to work with your body instead of against it. Welcome to the Good Vibe Studio, Miguel.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here, Jovonnie. Great to be on the show. And shout out to you for what you're doing here with all these episodes, providing these people tons of value. I know everybody listening to this right now is trying to become the best version of themselves. So you guys go do me a favor right now. Go leave a 5-star review on this podcast right now. It is not easy to do. So I'm just excited to be here and share as much value as I can to help these people improve their lives.
Thank you, Miguel. I appreciate it. And if y'all watching us on the YouTube version, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Miguel, before you became the person helping others through chronic illness, you were the person trying to understand your own body. You were an athlete, you were driven, you were a high performer. Then suddenly things that used to work stopped working. Take us back to that moment. Who were you before chronic fatigue? And what was the hardest part about losing that version of yourself?
Oh man, where do I even start? It's been such a crazy story, even just in that 5 years of being extremely sick, kind of losing everything I worked for and working my way back. Yes, I was like a whole different person before that. So yeah, my story is just growing up I would say I was a go-getter, was a very high achiever, had a very type A personality, the kind of person who I had to get the straight A's. I had to be like the team captain of the sports teams. I had to get all the accolades and everything. And I was kind of the person that everybody else could rely on and could lean on. And the person everybody saw as, okay, this guy can get the job done and he can do whatever he sets his mind to. So that actually really helped me all throughout my schooling, my sports and academics. However, sometimes it's a double-edged sword. So that personality type was also the same thing that led me to at first having a very successful career in personal training, but eventually pushing myself to my absolute limit, working 12-hour days, saying yes to basically every opportunity that came my way, and putting my health on the back burner. And that was in the pursuit of this quote unquote success, or to reach my full potential. And as somebody who I would say I had a lot of perfectionist tendencies, I always wanted to be productive. I always wanted to make sure I was moving forward. So I didn't really take any days off. In fact, resting felt foreign to me. If I wasn't doing something on the weekends, or if my calendar wasn't booked, or if it was empty, it was a very strange feeling. But eventually that led to my body hitting a wall, an absolute wall. At first I started feeling fatigue, headaches, insomnia, heart palpitations, things like that. And then it started to probably over the course of a year, really start to interfere with my quality of life to the point where I was having to decline hangouts with friends. I couldn't fully participate in these outings. I even had to slow down on my workouts because my body wasn't recovering as fast. So at first there was some physical things going on there, and then I started getting tons of brain fog. So fast forward a few years, I mean, it got so bad that I had to go off work for 6 months, then go back to work. I'd end up in the emergency room because I'd have all these strange symptoms. I'd feel like I was having a heart attack. And the crazy part is the most frustrating part, and I think a lot of people listening to this can relate, is you're trying to find answers to these things happening in your body. You're doing research, you're going to doctors. When that doesn't give you any answers, you go to specialists. When that doesn't give you any answers, you go to alternative health practitioners. And that was my life for about 4.5 years, yet I was continuing to get worse and worse until it got to the point where I was completely bedridden for 2 months. I was getting spoon fed, actually. No, sorry, 8 months. So spoon fed for about 8 months. Had to live with my grandparents for 6 months. They'd have to wipe me down. Couldn't even really brush my teeth most days. Had a blindfold and earplugs in a dark room. And then I was hospitalized for 2 months. And that's really where things turned around for me when I was like at rock bottom. Finally, I think it was my 40th or 50th doctor. He kind of figured out what was going on. It wasn't my organs that were shutting down. It wasn't anything in my physical body or like neck and below. It was actually something going on with my brain that was sending the wrong signals to my body, which is why everything I tried leading up to that point wasn't working, because it wasn't an external fix. It was an internal fix, which I'm happy to dive into. And today I would say my life is awesome. I don't feel any symptoms anymore. I could work out, I could work full time. I run CFS Recovery, and we've been able to help over 2,000 clients across 50 different countries to overcome chronic fatigue syndrome, long COVID, fibromyalgia, and related conditions. So yeah, it's a lot to unpack there.
That is 5 years. 5 years of being extremely sick. I think a lot of people can resonate with the personality, feeling the need to be productive, feeling the need to always do the best, maybe not perfectionist, but being at the top and performing at a high level, and probably seeing rest as foreign. I'm really glad that you put in the comments, y'all, rest in the comments if you are joining with us on YouTube and can vibe with us in the comment section. So you're talking with us and we're not talking to you, but you're a part of this conversation. But rest felt foreign. I think that resonates a lot with women who are always on the go, have so many different identities, roles, obligations. And I think that rest feels foreign to them because they feel like they can't stop. They are always on the go, never shuts down. And they're always caring for other people and not just for themselves. And I think that really resonates with a lot of people. But I also like that you said that could be a double-edged sword. Sometimes when you have that type of personality, that load of identities and roles to take on at the same time of trying to figure out how to care for you, how to love you. Something that really stood out is I'm glad that you talked about those symptoms that you were experiencing. It started off as fatigue, headaches, insomnia. So many people have normalized insomnia and think that's just how it is. I never sleep. I've had family members who would say, well, I don't ever really sleep, or I don't get much sleep at all. But if I go creeping in the room, they're asleep, but they're thinking that they never get any sleep. And so it's just kind of like not getting the good quality sleep or rest that you may expect to get. And I think that matters a lot. And so I like that you kind of gave them some context of what you were experiencing in Miguel's world during those 5 years. But then I love when you hit on the quality of life, Miguel, because when we do articulate what these symptoms and these experiences align with our quality of life, we can't take that insight and that data to the healthcare professionals that are trying to help us. So if you do not emphasize how it's impacting your quality of life, it really just falls short to these are just some symptoms that you've experienced, and it doesn't give enough picture how you're being impacted with all the things. So note taking, quality of life. Y'all put life in the comments. Something that you said is it took your 40th or 50th doctor to recognize that it was all in the brain. It was your body sending the wrong signals to your body. I don't think anyone probably in these first, because we're still within the first 10 minutes of this conversation, would have thought that this was all in the brain and that
Mhm.
nothing had to do with your body. When you're bedridden, you're having to get spoon fed. Let's talk a little bit about what that really meant. How did you feel hearing that it was all about your brain? How did they know it was all in your brain, and the signals were all misconstrued? And how did you feel about that at that moment, Miguel?
Yeah, I mean, at that moment, you got to imagine like this is about 5 years into this, and I had been to countless appointments and countless treatments, and nothing worked. At this point, I think I had done over 100 IV treatments with all these
Mm.
vitamins. I had so many detoxes that I was doing. I was on maybe 30 pills a day from a naturopath at that point. And so I kind of had a feeling that okay, these pills, they're not saving me. Maybe they're keeping me alive, but okay, clearly none of these treatments work. And it was just a frustrating mystery that I was dealing with. So for my doctor to say, hey, this is happening in your brain, it was actually a sigh of relief because at least somebody had an idea of what was going on versus a doctor looking at me and literally just saying, yeah, you need to see a psychologist, or yeah, you just have anxiety. At least this guy actually had an explanation. And over the course of the next month, we worked together. When I met him, I was bedridden. Like I couldn't even really sit up. Within a week, I was in a wheelchair. Within a week after that, I was using a walker. I was able to like hold myself up. And then a week after that, I was walking on my own 2 feet. Now, granted, I still had countless symptoms, but because I understood what was going on and like this loop that my brain was in, I was able to break that loop because essentially it's like a downward spiral where your brain is just firing off these crazy signals to your body. But it's also important that, unfortunately, you do have to go through that gauntlet of medical testings and scans in order to try and rule out anything else because maybe there is something else going on. But if people are listening to this and they're dealing with those things, that they've probably already done those tests and scans. So definitely do your due diligence. But when the doctors can't find anything in the scans or blood tests or any diagnostics, and they're saying, hey, on paper, you are perfectly healthy, or nothing really explains the level of symptoms that you're feeling, is probably a deeper issue and it's probably a hypersensitive nervous system, which is what can cause a lot of these symptoms. It's essentially imagine your brain like a supercomputer. There's a glitch in the supercomputer and it keeps triggering these symptoms and your fight or flight in your body, which is why you could try so many external solutions and it doesn't really stick. In fact, some of them can actually make you worse because you have to go in there and manually update that software in your brain through neuroplasticity techniques.
I like it. What I like most about it is you actually hit on some things that people feel like is the fix or the approach to take. You said you did at least hundreds of IV treatments, detoxes, pills from a naturopathic doctor, and you realized that it was this brain loop that consistently had this downward spiral for you. And so many people think, okay, if I detox, if I fast, if I, connect with the naturopathic doctor that's able to look at things on a holistic view, or I do the IV treatments, maybe there's something that I'm missing or lacking. All of those things still didn't contribute to what was actually happening in your brain, in those signals. And I'm really glad that you hit on that. You talked about a hypersensitive nervous system and you're talking about neuroplasticity, things like that. Can you just talk about what it meant for you to then start embracing this new path of healing, especially when you're now able to, sit up, then be in a wheelchair, then start to take some steps. So now you're seeing progress and there's benefits to it. And so it's making you want to continue on. But what were those first three things that you had to do, Miguel, after wrapping your mind around your brain signaling? What had
Mhm.
what had to happen for you in that moment?
Oh man, there were a few things. I think number one, it's interesting because had I been presented that same exact information 2 years prior or 3 years prior, I would have brushed it off. In fact, I did see some things online before about neuroplasticity, brain retraining, this and that. If you train your brain, now all of a sudden you can go from bedridden to playing sports again. And to me, it just didn't make sense. How do you just think your way better? Is that what you're telling me? I would even get personally offended. I'm like, you think it's that simple? But I realized, okay, there's a lot more to this. And I was open to the idea at that time because I was in such a bad place. Like I didn't have any other option. And that's typically what we see with people is they reach out to us as the absolute last resort when they've already tried other things for years, sometimes even decades. And so the first thing, in order to actually fix this, after you rule out all the tests and scans and you're clear there, first you have to understand, like, what are we even trying to fix here? Like, how did this happen in the first place? Like, why am I even feeling all of these symptoms? What does that mean that there's a glitch in my brain? And so quick crash course on essentially what happened to me and what could be happening to you is everybody has this maximum stress threshold. Think of it like a bucket that your body can handle, right? Everybody's born with different levels they can handle, but over time, you have different stressors show up: finances, work, relationships. Maybe you're moving houses. Maybe you have an exam coming up. Maybe you have a job promotion or switching careers. Here's the biggest ones underlying all of that: personality type. Do you have a type A personality? Perfectionism. Is it hard to say no to people? Do you constantly just take on more than you can handle? And do you have this like warrior mentality where if there's a challenge that comes up, you say, no, I'm going to crush that. I'm going to do whatever it takes because I have this strong mindset. So you layer those personality types on top of these other stressors in life that everybody deals with. That's when you get this formula where that bucket, that stress threshold starts to overflow. And, if there's a bar, a certain limit, once you start going over that bar, now your brain is trying to warn you, like, hey, this is a lot for us. Let's slow down. So at first it's going to whisper to you. It can't speak English though. It'll give you signals in the form of like symptoms and sensations in your body. It'll make you more fatigued. If you're working on the computer all day and that's your work and you're pushing yourself, it will give you brain fog. If you're an athlete and you're pushing too hard in the gym, it'll make your muscles and joints achy. It'll give you heart palpitations every time you try to run. It'll give you shortness of breath, or it could give you a mixture of all of those things. And so when people are dealing with these symptoms, they can over time become terrified of their own body and they lose trust with their body and they feel extremely fragile. They think, if I go do that activity, is my body going to punish me? And so it's this negative association they have with their body, like their body's out to get them. But what really helped me was flipping that to seeing, wait a minute, the reason my body's doing that is because I pushed it way too hard for way too long, because I redlined the engine. So it's actually doing the opposite. It's not trying to kill me. It's actually trying to protect me from myself. And so once I understood, okay, that's why I'm in this situation. That makes sense. I thought I was just unlucky, and by some unlucky draw, I got placed with this curse of some mystery disease nobody knew how to solve. But when it made sense of like, oh, that actually adds up. My engine was revved up too long. Now it's in a cool down period. It just happened to get stuck in this cool down period. So once I understood that, then it came down to really responding well to the symptoms, breaking that cycle. Because typically what people go through is they'll try to do an activity or do something, and it may trigger some more symptoms. And so that just reinforces this belief that, oh, my body is broken. I got some mystery illness. I'm going to shrink my world. I'm not going to do that activity. Let's try something else. Well, that flared me up. I'm not going to do that. And over time, their world becomes smaller and smaller, not just physically, but even socially, even mentally. Everything starts to contract. So if you can't do all the things that you used to do, who are you? Like, you start to lose your identity as well. You go from this go-getter, this high performer in life, to somebody who has trouble just getting through the day. So that alone amplifies your stress. That alone is its own stressor. So you can see how quickly things can start to spiral. But if you can respond well to symptoms, and every time you have those flare-ups, you understand that, okay, my body is trying to protect me. Okay, let me show it that I'm responsible with the energy it's allocated to me. Let me pull back a little bit, right? And let me try to respond as well as I can to these symptoms. And that's actually where the magic happens in recovery. That's where you're signaling your brain that, hey, we're going to be okay, and I'm going to take good care of you. There's no real danger here. So I'm going to take my foot off the gas pedal. And I mean, we have all these different steps. Like we call those adjustment periods, where your body's adjusting to a new level of activity, kind of like working out. Like you work out, you get sore, you take a break, and then you level up. With this, it's like you very slowly expand activity in different areas of life, and then you pull back. And then if you do that properly, you essentially complete what we call like a progress cycle. And recovery is made up of dozens and dozens of progress cycles. And lastly, if that's step 2, which is responding well to symptoms, step 3 is really building your threshold, and it's being consistent with that. When your body does give you energy, show it that you're responsible with that energy, and you don't just go all out and go all in once it gives you that flash of energy. But building threshold, that is the longest stage of recovery. But that's really how you go from just surviving and getting by to truly thriving and living life without all of these limitations. And, we've seen people use this method from like as early as 9 years old up to 86 years old, people who've been dealing with symptoms for a few months to literally 5 decades. That's the longest one. And it's absolutely possible, as long as people have ruled out all these other health issues, to recalibrate a hypersensitive nervous system, which is what this kind of work does.
Thank you, Miguel. Y'all, this episode of the Empire Plates, Empire Lives podcast is brought to you by 4 Vibrations. Check the show notes, head over to 4vibrations.me and connect and vibe. Now let's get back into the conversation. Miguel, you talked about number 1, what am I trying to fix? And I think that's really important, because if you don't know about that max threshold that you talked about, and you're understanding that you're losing trust with your body because you're trying things and it doesn't seem that it's being efficient or effective, you start feeling like your body's more in control than you are, and that you're losing control, or you're a victim to your body because you can't figure it out. And so I think it's really good to have that rooted question is, what am I trying to fix? And not giving up on the fix, because so many people on the Empire Plates, Empire Lives podcast had talked about years of experiences and trying to get to an answer before they can figure it out. It took you to 40 to 50th doctor to really break the code of really understanding what was actually happening with you. Another podcast guest talked about being on 3 different continents, doctors from 3 different continents trying to figure out what was going on with her pain. And so I think it's really good to really understand, what am I trying to fix, and not giving up until you get that answer. 2, how are you responding to the symptoms and the importance of breaking the cycle? I think that's really important, because you want to think about the identity, the thoughts, the feelings, the beliefs that kind of shape who you are. And then understanding that sometimes the patterns, and I say this all the time, the patterns that we created to survive aren't the patterns that's going to allow us to thrive. And so you kind of use some of that verbiage that I already love to talk about, because I want my endometriosis, adenomyosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, fibroid fighters, I want them to know they can go from surviving to thriving. And it happens through lifestyle changes, but it happens also through advocating on what it is that you need, so you can embrace your healing, your journey on your own terms. And I think that's really important. But then you talked about the building your own threshold, and you talked about the different phases and cycles and periods of what that looks like when you're recovering. And when you're recovering from survival, it wasn't something bad that you were doing when you were in survival mode. It what kept you alive, and it was what you needed at that particular point in time. But now your body's communicating to you and saying, I need a different way of life. I need a different healing rhythm. I need a different vibe. And I think that's what's most important, which is why the 4 Vibrations movement is so important to me, because a healing rhythm is what people need. And that rhythm changes. No one dances to the same beat over and over and over. People like a variety of songs and music. And so you have to be willing to embrace it. I think so many women can connect with that, because sometimes the hardest loss isn't just energy or ability. It's in identity. The woman who could do everything, the woman who never needed help, the woman who was always pushing through. And sometimes healing requires us to rebuild a healthier relationship with who we are becoming, and knowing to give yourself that permission to become someone else. Something you said, Miguel, really stood out, that the traits that helped you succeed were not always the same traits you needed to heal. So many women listening are caregivers, leaders, moms, entrepreneurs, high achievers. They're pushing harder. How can the mindset that helps someone succeed become the same mindset that keeps their nervous system stuck?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you're exactly right, because actually a majority of the people who reach out to us for help, about 75 to 80% of them are women. And many of them also mothers, right? So it's that extra layer of, hey, my identity as a mother is I need to be there for my children. I need to be a good example. I need to protect them, you know? And when you're unable to do that, there's almost this sense of guilt and shame. And it's almost like this ultimate challenge placed in front of you. Now, in the beginning, when you still have some capacity, a lot of women will just try to push through that and try to really be strong for good intentions. They want to be there for their family. Like, who wouldn't, right? The only thing is that almost like warrior mentality, or that just really trying to show up for other people and almost put other people before themselves. That is the whole reason the body is sending these signals in the first place, right? It's almost like the ultimate wake up call to get back into authenticity, where it's forcing you to prioritize yourself. And even more than just women in terms of identity, one of the things I see a lot of people falling into the trap of is, because they've been an analyzer and perfectionist and high performer their whole life, they think this is who I am. Like, this is what got me to this point. And it's very difficult to let go of that thing that brought all these good things into your life prior. So they believe that's just my identity. And they think, well, if I'm not that person, am I going to lose my edge in the future? Like, will I be able to do all the things I wanted to do in the past? Or do I have to become a completely different person and almost like abandon this person I spent my whole life building? And so they're terrified, right? I was terrified of losing myself. But at the same time, you're also exhausted from 20 browser tabs open at 2 a.m. trying to figure out what's going on, right? So what you have to understand is you can actually become an even better version of yourself once you are healthy. Like, once you do change things, the whole goal is not just to get out of this mess and get back to your life and then go back to the life you were living. I've talked to countless people. Initially, they come to us and they're like, my life was so good before. I want to get back to working out 6 times a week and working 50 hours a week and being productive. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. If we do that, we're just going to have a repeat of exactly the situation you're in. So it's not about getting back to your old life. It's about actually creating this 2.0 version of yourself. And that's kind of like our whole motto. The whole goal is to create that 2.0 version of yourself, so that you not only come out of this, but we make sure this never happens again. And once people are willing to kind of let go of that old version, man, sky's the limit. We've seen people do amazing things, start businesses, start new careers, do things they never thought possible. And it's just amazing to see what happens when you get in line with your nervous system and you trust it, and it also trusts you. You'd be surprised at what you can accomplish.
I really appreciate that. Y'all drop let go in the comments. Let go. I really needed you to really remind me of that, because for me, my wake up call was I was driving to work and I got this debilitating pelvic pain on my right side while I was driving, and it immediately made me lose just a little bit of strength while I was driving. I swerved into the lane next to me. Right behind me was an 18-wheeler coming and approaching in that lane. I had just enough strength to get back in my lane, which terrified me. But again, I kept pushing through. I kept going to work. Afterwards, I spoke with my nurse practitioner, and she told me to go to the ER for imaging. They needed to see what was really happening, and they didn't have that type of equipment in her office. And so what had happened was they saw a large cyst was on my right ovary, and I believe that it had ruptured, and that's what caused that pain. But it led me down to having surgery, and it took a 4-hour long surgery for me to realize that how I was living my lifestyle, pushing through, working so many different jobs, being the person who prioritized everyone but myself, being a people pleaser, and just really being disconnected from my body and self-abandonment for so many years. It allowed me to realize this is what caused stage 4 endometriosis, adenomyosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and fibroids. And it was not only a wake-up call, but it was, you said losing yourself because they have to do something different. No, it was actually finding myself, finding a way to get to a place where I could love myself, care for myself, and show up for me in a way that I had never done before. But if it wasn't for that chronic pelvic pain, if it wasn't for that scary moment that could have took my life while driving because of that painful moment, I would have continued to ignore my irregular periods. I would have continued to ignore the painful bowel movements every time my menstrual cycle was on. I would continue to ignore my weight fluctuating and the mood swings. There were so many things that my body was communicating with me over the years that I had never listened to, never paid attention to, because I was so busy doing all these other things, but listening and connecting to myself. So don't lose yourself, find yourself, and don't try to go back to who you used to be. Go be a better version of yourself. It could be the 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. I feel like, Miguel, when you're healing, you're always continuing to evolve and level up what it looks like to truly continue to show up loving and caring for you in the best way possible. And so I feel like those versions are always, or should always be, getting better over time. And so let go, put that in the comment, and then put the word goal. The goal is to be a better version of you and to really help you. And so I really like that we talked about that. Survival mode is expensive. Eventually your body asks for what your lifestyle never made space for. I'm gonna say it one more time. One more time. Eventually your body asks for what your lifestyle never really made space for. You share something that so many people experience, searching for answers while feeling like nobody truly understands what's happening. A lot of women hear your labs are normal, everything looks fine, maybe it's just your stress, or that's just your period. What happens emotionally and physically when someone feels symptoms in their body, but they never feel validated within their experiences?
Oh man, like it becomes a very quick downward spiral because, I mean, in the beginning, you're feeling a lot of physical symptoms, and for the most part, you can kind of push through it, right? Then it really starts getting in the way of quality of life. And you can very quickly start to feel like you're going crazy when you show up to the doctor's office and they look you in the eye and they tell you, you're perfectly normal. Congratulations. I mean, I've had doctors tell me, wow, I wish I had your test results as I'm in a wheelchair at 21 years old in their office. Like, wow, your blood's so healthy. I wish I had your results. I'm like, huh? I can't walk. I'm 21 years old. I used to be an athlete and I'm struggling right now. My heart rate is like resting at 130. And so it can feel very isolating. I'd say that's one of the biggest things, because also, even if you have family and friends there and they can be there for you and love you and support you, unless they've been in your shoes and felt the symptoms you're feeling and thought the thoughts that you think at 2 a.m., where you're wondering, is this going to be my life forever? Am I ever going to be normal again? If I could just have a day without symptoms, oh man, what would I give for that? They never ask themselves those questions unless they've been through this. And so when they're offering you advice or they're just looking at you like nodding their head, you just know they don't understand. And you almost feel like you're in this bubble where it's you and then there's the rest of the world outside you, almost like you're living in a different dimension. I remember I used to have this a lot at Christmas or New Year's. I mean, I'm Filipino, so we have pretty big Christmas parties. I remember Christmas, everybody's opening presents, everybody's smiling and happy, and just the tearing of the Christmas wrapper, like I'm getting ringing in my ears and my heart rate's going up. And while everybody's like super excited, I'm sitting there trying to put a smile on my face to try and fit in, but deep inside I am breaking down just trying to keep up with them. And so it's going through these things. It's something that not a lot of people can relate to, not just on the physical side, but emotional side, and especially social side. It's one of like the most valuable human needs. It's the feeling to fit in or to feel like you're part of a community. And when you don't fit into like the normal functioning people, but you're also not quite completely sick, you're not in a hospital 24/7, you're in between these two worlds where people look at you like you're normal, but you're not quite normal. But you're also going to all these doctor's appointments, so you're seeing all these sick people, but you're not like fully sick. So you're like, where's my place in this world? And if you're not working, I know for me, there were times when I had to go off work and just focus on recovery. It just felt very unproductive. I always wanted to be that person who's like building things or bringing value to a company or just something. And I just felt like I was taking up resources. I'm like, I'm just at home eating food, breathing this air. Like, what am I actually giving to the world? I'm just like suffering. Like, what's the point? So it also, it forces you to have a lot of introspection. I'd say that's one of the benefits, because how often in life are you actually going to pause everything and sit there with your own thoughts? Because it's like one of the only activities that you could do. So it's very interesting. You know, when people are going through this, it can feel like the biggest curse. Like, this thing stole my life. It took everything away from me. And it's not until you get to the other side and you start feeling better and truly thriving, and you learn all of these lessons of how to live a sustainable life and figure out who you really want to be without all the external pressures. It's not until that point where you see this kind of curse as the biggest blessing you've had. Going back, really quick analogy to your car situation, right? If you didn't have that situation, you wouldn't have known there was something going on there, and they wouldn't have fixed it. So I love to share this analogy of, at first, you know, you could be pretty upset that this thing was just dropped into your life and kind of makes you slam on the brakes in life. But afterwards, it's almost like you get out of the car after it slams on the brakes and you realize that car was headed off a cliff. Because if you really think about it, if you were to continue this route for the next 10 years, 15 years, where would your life be? How much stress is that? How much sleep are you losing? So your body or the car actually saved you. It's like the car broke down before it could go off the cliff. And you don't realize that until you're out of the situation. And so it becomes this very traumatic, painful, very like curse experience to being like, oh, I get it. Like, my nervous system was kind of smarter than me, kind of saved me from myself. So what was painful was actually the biggest gift and blessing. And when you can look at it that way, after you get to the other side of this, you are so, so grateful. And it gives you this resilience that I don't think anything else in life can give you. You become anti-fragile.
I love it, especially when you talked about that resilience that you are given, because you're 100% right. And I agree with it. It saves you. And you don't feel it at that particular point in time because you're grieving. You're grieving what you thought was right with your life, with your body, your health, your habits, your healing, all of those things. You're starting to grieve and really come to a realization that everything isn't what it should have been. Or could have been. But nobody really taught us, Miguel, to grow up in a society living where we prioritize our nervous system, where we prioritize advocating for ourselves, when we know what it looks like to say what we need, what we don't need, what the things we need to look for when it comes to our physical health, emotional health, spiritual health, financial health. All of those different health dimensions take a toll and they play a part. And sometimes we feel like when we see on the outside, if that looks good, then we're all good. But it's not until we get into some labs or doctor's reports or dis-ease in the body or diagnosis. And now there's a name with the disruption of what's happening in your body. And now it's like, okay, now what do I do? And so I'm really glad that you said that, because a lot of times in different community groups and things that I see, yes, living with endometriosis, adenomyosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, fibroids can be very frustrating. It could be very hard. It could be a lot of obstacles and challenges. But because you know what's happening in your body, there are things that you can now do, try, explore, because you got more insight, you got more data of what's going on in your body, that I'm excited about it. I'm happy that I got it, because like you said, if I didn't know, what would 10, 15, 20, 30 years of continuing to have that lifestyle that I was living, how much more havoc could it have wreaked in my body, to where more damage could have been done that I had no idea of, because I can't see on the inside. And so I think that was really important. I like that you resonated with isolation. You know, when you know something's wrong, but you can't put a name to it, you're unable to truly advocate with the healthcare system to know what's going on, you start to feel advocated Isolated. Two, you talked about compassion. For me, I wrote down compassion without empathy. People see what you're going through. You're telling them what you're experiencing, but they can't empathize because they've never been in your shoes to truly understand what it feels like to bleed 14 or 21 days, to be on over-the-counter medication because of your pain level every single day, with or without a period, to have your weight fluctuating, to be able to not sleep, to always have that chronic fatigue and never feel like you get enough sleep, but you slept 10, 12 hours and you still wake up drained and tired. People can't empathize. They can have some compassion, but they can't empathize with that. And then you also talked about being able to be in a place to have introspection. I think introspection is powerful because had you not slowed down or had to stop or even had to take a moment to think about what you're actually going through, prioritize just you for a moment with your thoughts, your feelings, and your beliefs of what's actually happening, you would never get to a point to understand what you're doing in regards to the pattern you're living in, the cycle, the survival mode that's going to allow you the opportunity to break free from that. So I really love that you talked about that. So drop "save me" in the comments because that's what your body is trying to do, is trying to save you through it all. One thing I love that you brought up is this changing question. Instead of asking, how do I get rid of this symptom? You started asking, what if there's a deeper reason my body is responding this way? How did changing that question change your entire healing journey, Miguel?
Oh, it changed everything because probably the biggest stressor, in addition to the pain and the emotional stress of losing my identity and losing my job and getting buried in debt as I was recovering and going from an athlete to getting spoon fed, the whole time I thought my body was the enemy. And I thought there was like this civil war in my body. It was like me against you. And I kind of hate you right now. And I feel like you hate me because you're punishing me when I'm just trying to sit up and eat my food. And so for the longest time, it became a very dark internal relationship with my own nervous system because I didn't understand why it was giving me all these symptoms, right? I didn't even know it was causing the symptoms. I just knew my body there was something wrong. And so when I realized like, this thing isn't out to get me, this thing is really trying to help me. And I almost like shed a tear when he told me that. He was like, no, your nervous system is there for you. You think it's this and that and some poison that went into your body. No, it's like your lifestyle. And it's not even your fault. No one taught you this. Like you said, no one teaches us this stuff. And for you guys watching or listening right now, no one teaches you this stuff. And we can feel guilty like, I did this to myself. I shouldn't have done this and I shouldn't have done that. That's its own stressor. But just understand that you were doing what you thought was best for your life. And for the most part, that's why people fall into this, is they try to make the most of their life. They try to maximize their potential, but they don't realize like there are certain limits to the human body. So when I realized that, oh, we're on the same page here, we're actually on the same team and we can work in harmony versus against each other, that's how we really come out of this. And so that was a huge mental shift for me. So now every time the symptoms came up, it wasn't this panic and fear of like having this phobia of anything I felt in my body. There was a time where I was terrified of my own heartbeat. I couldn't sleep because my head would be on the pillow and I could feel my heart beating. And I was like, is it going to explode? Is it going to explode? All night, right? I was so scared to move because of my heart rate jump. I thought it was game over. And so once you start having this more positive feedback loop with your body, where actually every time I felt the symptoms and flare-ups, I would go, oh, thank you, body. I know you're trying to protect me. Now, that is a mindset shift or a reframing that I had. Physically, it still sucked. So I'm not saying that like you're super happy when the symptoms come. It sucked, like big time. I didn't like them. But reframing it and looking at it in the way of, okay, I see what you're trying to do here, and you're not out to punish me. Then over time, like they just got better and better. But any kind of like negative emotions towards those symptoms, any kind of fear, frustration, anticipation, worry, anger, these are all things. It's almost like pouring fuel on the fire. Because if we want to go even deeper on a scientific level, it's really the amygdala we've found that can cause these symptoms. That's your fight or flight center. When you have fight or flight symptoms or freeze symptoms, that's high heart rate, high blood pressure, dizziness, brain fog. There's about 100 symptoms that can occur because your amygdala is hyperactive. So the more we worry, the more we fear, have those negative emotions, the more that lights up. And you guys can probably recall when you are in your biggest flare-ups, it's hard to think logically because all the blood flows to your amygdala, your fight or flight center, and it's not going to your other parts of your brain where you can actually think logically and clearly. So, I mean, there were times where I had flare-ups. I saw a mole on my arm and I'm like, that's cancer. That is definitely cancer. We got to call the doctor, get this thing out ASAP. And then the next day I was fine. I was like, I can't believe I believed that. That's been there my whole life. But it's hard to think straight and think rationally when your amygdala is just on fire. So just understanding that will happen. It'll help you not beat yourself up if you drop the ball a few times and you don't respond perfectly. And there is no perfect response, but as long as you're responding the best you absolutely can, that's what matters because it gets better over time.
It does. I always stress progress over perfection. Like that,
Yes.
That's just what is necessary. I like that you talked about the positive feedback loop and you were real with it. Like just because I had a different feedback loop, a positive one based on what my body was experiencing instead of my typical negative one, things didn't just automatically change because my thought changed. But it helps with that rewiring and what's actually happening on the nervous system level when you're choosing a different thought or feeling or belief when you're experiencing something totally different. And so I'm really glad that you broke that down for us in regards to how powerful a positive feedback loop is. Your body is always carrying what you normalize, because if we only silence the symptom, we may miss the story the body has been trying to tell us. And just like Miguel just reminded us, and I've been saying on several episodes, your body is not against you, it's for you. And you and your body need to be in alignment. So then that way you could truly find a way to go from surviving into thriving. Let's help the person that's listening connect the dots, Miguel. Someone may be experiencing fatigue, inflammation, pelvic pain, digestive changes, brain fog, feeling disconnected from themselves, and they don't understand how their nervous system plays a role. What happens when the body stays in a constant state of protection? And how does someone begin creating safety in their own body again?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if left unattended, it usually doesn't just get better on its own. I've had many people, including myself, sometimes it may improve a little bit, but it's almost like the baseline that your nervous system goes back to is, okay, symptoms, protection mode, let's lock down because we don't really trust the world outside. So typically it doesn't just get better on its own. You have to have a manual intervention where you go in there and you start rewiring a lot of that stuff. When I say rewiring, there's actual physical changes on like your synapse level in the brains. So when people say, oh, mindset work or think better, there are actual physical changes in the brain that are happening, like if you had a microscope. And so really important to continue to learn as well. So listening to podcasts like this kind of content, finding YouTube channels with things that resonate and actually give you answers that make sense. We have a lot of people following our YouTube channel, CFS Recovery, but not everybody's going to resonate with it, but they might resonate with this podcast and vice versa. So I think if you can find something out there that makes sense, the more logical this becomes, the less emotional it will be. And emotions is like pouring fuel on the fire in your nervous system. You want things to make sense. And so I would encourage people to continue learning about this stuff. There's so many resources to listen to, but if you find something that does make sense, just go all in. Go all in if it does make sense to you, because up until this point, you probably tried so many things that really didn't make sense, but you gave it a shot anyways. So if you're willing to do that, then when something does make sense and it comes along, then I would honestly suggest go all in and consume as much of it as you can and just absorb it, internalize it.
And what you made me realize is that so many times people said, I've tried everything. And there's no possible way that they've tried every single thing, and then the right protocols and manners and the way that it is happening. And so I'm glad that Miguel reminded you to make sure that if it makes sense for you, to give it a try. And that you haven't tried every single thing, and you just never know what may work. So if it makes sense to you and it's something that you feel kind of strongly about and you're like, okay, this could work, go for it. Because remember, it's your healing, it's your journey. What we went through, what we've experienced is our own healing, our own journey. And so we had the courage to go do it. This is your permission and your daily episode reminder to go out there and find what works for you. You've been informed, you've been empowered, you've been engaging in this conversation. Go find out what works for you. This is a big one for my community because many women don't struggle with symptoms. They struggle with feeling betrayed in their own body. They think, why is my body doing this to me? How does someone shift from fearing their body to rebuilding trust with it?
Yeah, it starts little by little. When people come on board or they start watching our content and implementing it, there's always going to be some doubt in the beginning because a lot of people are like, okay, if it's that good, if it's that simple, every doctor should know about this. Every hospital, every clinic, I should have known about this long ago because this is way too simple to work. Now, I'll preface this with, it's actually a fairly simple approach. It's not easy though, right? It takes a lot of repetition, a lot of consistency. So at first, once you start constantly reminding yourself, this is a hypersensitive nervous system. I'm safe. I'm going to be okay. It's not going to kill me. Of course, once you had the tests and scans done and they ruled all of that stuff out, at first there's going to be, let's say if there's like a ratio of doubt to belief, doubt is very high. Like you might have 1% belief that this stuff will work and 99% doubt. But you're like, okay, well, 1% belief, that's still better than me just sitting here doing nothing. I got to do something, right? And so you do something and it actually kind of works. An example of what this looks like is, maybe you're having a flare-up, one of your typical flare-ups. But instead of spiraling mentally and emotionally, you're reminding yourself, okay, the more calm I stay, the faster this will go away and the less intense it will feel. It's just my body trying to protect me. I'm actually kind of appreciative of my body. And then you actually come out of that flare-up in 2 days versus 6 days. There's like a little bit of proof there, a little bit of I call it a validation cycle, where what you thought was going to happen, it actually comes true. And it validates this like hypothesis or this theory you came across online from some random video, from some random dude or woman, and actually works. And you're like, okay, if it worked a little bit, let me try it again. And it works a little bit more. It works a little bit more. But it gets easier and easier the more you do it. So I would encourage them to just give it a try, but give it a genuine try. And when I say try, I mean the next time the symptoms come up and you feel your thoughts starting to go down the spiral of, did I do this wrong? I shouldn't have done that. Uh-oh, what if it's this? Should I book another specialist appointment? Boom, 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 boom. Stop it right there and be like, even those thoughts alone, that's probably my hypersensitive nervous system. That's my body trying to protect me. It's trying to keep me safe. And then stop that conversation right there. Like, don't even engage with those more negative thoughts. If you can do that, and you can even just have your first experience of having a less intense flare-up or coming out of a flare-up just a little bit faster, that's when a bell goes off in your brain and you're like, okay, it actually worked a little bit. I guess I do have some control over the level of discomfort that I feel. And that's where it started for me. Like when I started implementing this stuff, I still felt the symptoms. My heart was still skipping. I still had shortness of breath. I was shaking the first time I was sitting up in a wheelchair. That was my physical experience. But mentally, I was like, no, my body's on my side. It's uncomfortable, but it's not going to kill me. It's trying to protect me. And so it was a completely different experience mentally and emotionally than it had been in the past. And that's how I built my life to where it is now, and how we've seen like hundreds of cases, women bedridden for, there's one, Alessia, bedridden for 12 years. And then now she's traveling the world, like working again. There's people who are in wheelchairs for a couple of years and they're skiing. There's people who couldn't eat more than 5 different foods for a few years. And now Nikki, for example, she runs a baking business and she eats all of this ice cream and whatever, where she couldn't even tolerate like water sometimes before. So, regardless of where you're at, as long as you've had the tests and scans done, no matter how severe you are, how long you've had this for, there's always hope that you can get better. And you'd be surprised at how powerful the body is at healing itself once you get in alignment with giving it what it needs to recover.
I agree. And I'm glad that you brought in some testimonials and how it's worked for several people and not just with yourself. It made me think about one of my clients who ever since they were younger, middle school, high school, having to go get pain injections and painful periods, and just working within like the first couple of months, changing different lifestyles when it comes to working with her mindset and working with food and getting into a rhythm. I call it my M to the third degree healing empowerment formula: mindset, mindful eating, and movement. And when you think about that nervous system and getting into a regulated state and being mindful of your stress load, how are you managing, eliminating it, really having boundaries, what you feed energy into, her pain decreased dramatically. Somebody who bled 14 to 21 days went to 5-day periods, 5 to 6 day periods, heavy double pads, double deckers, because that flow was bleeding to like 30 minutes and you're already bleeding out. 2 light flows, ultra thin pads. So it truly does help when you start thinking about mindset, when you think about nervous system regulation, when you think about the foods that you're eating, when it comes to inflammatory to anti-inflammatory, when it comes to just what's on your plate, but most importantly, how you're moving with the deep breathing, with the walking, just showing up for your body in a different way could truly shift some things for you. And that was before she even got a diagnosis of adenomyosis, after working with me, already starting to see those benefits before putting a name to what she had experienced for years. And so I think it's very powerful to really have those moments, to really showing what people couldn't do at one state, but because they changed their mind, they embraced something totally different, and they realized that their body wasn't against them, but for them, and they wanted to go from surviving to thriving. They did something different and they trusted themselves again. And so this is your reminder to trust yourself again. Comment the word trust. Trust yourself again to really be able to go out and make things happen. And so we can kind of think about some things when it comes to like your next protocol: try harder, do this, do that, research more. But why can sometimes doing more keep people stuck? And how do they know when their body is really just asking for a different approach, Miguel?
Well, it's really interesting. The same personality type that was like, go, go, go. We need to cover every detail. We need to be as productive as possible. It's interesting. Like some people who, let's say, for example, that's how they showed up in work and they're so sick they can't work anymore. That energy shifts to recovery. So now recovery is like the full-time job. And so for people listening to this, recovery is either a part-time job for you or it's a full-time job. Or, it's a full-time job plus you're working overtime because you're thinking about it 24/7 on how to solve this thing. So a lot of times what I see is there's too many different approaches or things boiled down together. Too many checklists going on, that's a perfectionist tendency. It's like, okay, I have to wake up at 8 a.m. and get the sunshine in my eyes within 5 minutes. I have to drink this shake at this time. I have to do my Epsom salt bath at night. I have to meditate for at least 20 minutes. And boom, boom, boom. I'm like, dude, just listening to that, I'm stressed out. I'm not even doing it. I'm stressed out. So it can feel like a full-time job. And you start stacking more and more on. Well, that's kind of the whole reason, probably one of the reasons the body is in this position in the first place. And so it's interesting. What we do actually when people come on board is we look at what they're doing. We're like, okay, you're doing the meditation. Is that helping you? Do you feel like that helps you? And for some people, it's like, no, I actually get stressed, but I read somewhere I have to meditate to calm my mind. Some people get more stressed when they meditate. Take myself, for example. When I try to sit there and close my eyes, my mind is racing, which probably means I needed it. But like in that situation, if it's not helping, don't do it. So a lot of it is cutting this dead weight of all these things you feel like you have to do and focusing on things that are actually moving the needle forward. So there's also this saying, I'm sure everybody's heard it before, but what's the definition of insanity? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, right? Perfect example, me with my naturopath. Like I should have known by IV number 50, this is probably not going to work. But I went for 50 more IVs thinking okay, cross my fingers, maybe this week it's going to work. Meanwhile, I'm burning money. So if something is not working, probably a good idea to stop doing it, right? And for example, I'm not saying like if you're taking medication and it's not working, cold turkey stop. Always consult with your medical physician and professionals. I'm not a doctor, but if it's not working, probably worth looking into. And before you start adding in a whole bunch of stuff to an already overloaded nervous system, probably good to do an audit of what is not moving the needle forward. And sometimes it's tricky to see what that is. And that's where people like yourself, Jovonnie, or myself and my team, we can actually go in there and look at your situation and be like, hey, here are your blind spots. Because it's very hard to spot your blind spots when you're in the eye of the storm, right? And we have protocols for that. We can see, okay, your physical activity looks okay, but cognitively, you're on your phone quite a bit. You're doing a lot of research on these health articles, or emotionally, there's these things going on. So like, what does that balance look like? And what can we remove first before we start adding things in? So there's space for the things to be added in.
Yes, it is. I like that you said balance. Y'all comment the word balance if you're still vibing with us in the conversation. I like balance because, like you said, you could do an audit, you could do an assessment. There's so many different ways, but you hit on what I love most, Miguel, and it's the blind spots. So many people think they know all that they know, and they don't even consider some of those blind spot areas that could have a true impact on your health, your habits, and your healing. And so that was so many times I try to help people with their triggers, but even with the patterns, people don't say it going around, oh yeah, I'm in a self-abandonment pattern. They don't know they're self-abandoning. They just know that they're showing up for their community, for their family, doing the things that they love and care about, but they don't realize that they're not prioritizing their health. And that's why it leads to certain symptoms and the body being in the state that they're in. And so I like that we talked about that. Something that really stood out to me with that though, Miguel, what you're talking about is not the what. You can be meditating and it's still causing you even more stress, but it's the how. And it's the state that you're in when you're doing those things. And I think that's what matters most. So if you're already in a chronic state of stress and overwhelm, but then you try to meditate and you're not in a place to calm yourself, your nervous system, then what you're doing is still not as effective as it could have been if you were doing it in a certain state that would have been more receptive. For the person listening who feels overwhelmed, they don't need another complicated routine. They just need somewhere to begin. What is the one small shift that they can take today that starts rebuilding their energy, their confidence, and their trust?
Yeah, I would say the number one thing is if you can remind yourself as much as possible and try to believe it, even for a split second, my body is safe, and get to that even fraction of a second of feeling of safety. That is going to go such a long way, because probably if you're anything like me or like the thousands of people we've seen, you probably don't feel safe in your body. You probably even forgot what feeling safe feels like. And so if you can even have a fraction of a second of that, now your body and nervous system has a reference point to work towards, because ultimately that's what we want it to go towards, is that feeling of safety, feeling of calmness, feeling of thriving. And unless we have that reference point, it's going to be very difficult to get to that feeling, right? You get stuck in that place. So if you can remind yourself as much as humanly possible, you may have to do this hundreds of times a day, but I am safe. It's okay. My body is trying to protect me. It's just a hypersensitive nervous system. Any variation of those, but ultimately, if you can get to that feeling of safety, you're going to absolutely crush it, Hey, Jovonnie, I'm just going to plug my laptop in. I just realized it's at 1%. Is that okay?
Okay. Yes, sir.
Cool.
All right, y'all. So Miguel just reminded us that you need to feel safe in your own body. Remind yourself, say it, but most importantly, feel it, even if you're just feeling it for a half of a second. And I think that's what we needed to make sure that we always remember, is that we can be safe in our own body. But it first starts with us, with navigating and discovering what does safety look like, feel like, and sound like for our own body. Miguel, we're getting into the Vitality Sparks round. So rapid, quick fire responses. You ready?
Yep.
It's going to be fill in the blank. All right, here we go. The biggest misconception about chronic fatigue is?
The solution is outside of yourself, and you need something outside of you to solve this.
Most people don't realize their body is trying to?
protect them from themselves.
Survival mode feels like
Running on an endless treadmill with no time limit.
the nervous system begins to heal when
Ooh. You learn to work alongside your nervous system on the same team. Yes, that's what I would say. When you're
more
aligned,
high achievers need permission to
rest.
one habit secretly stealing people's energy is
Overthinking.
healing became possible for me when I stopped
Being so hard on myself.
one small choice that can change someone's tomorrow is
Be kind to yourself.
there we go. Last two questions, Miguel. Give some insights to the girl dads, the father figures, the male role models, the brothers, the partners, the spouses of women with endometriosis, adenomyosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, fibroids, dealing with pelvic pain, heavy bloating, fatigue. How could they be more part of that healing journey?
Yeah, I know you're probably in there in the trenches with the person you're supporting, and just know that even though it may not look like it sometimes, even if they're just lying there, sometimes from what we've heard, you might think, hey, are they lazy? Are they really trying? Just know that they are trying 10 times harder than what it shows on the outside. And they're fighting a battle that you can't really see. So if you could just be there for them and support them through this chapter in their life, that will go such a long way. And your emotional support goes such a long way, more than you could ever imagine.
Thank you, Miguel. If you could have a meal with any historical figure, who would it be and what would you all eat?
Alexander the Great. And when we say, what would I eat?
What would you all eat?
Oh, it would definitely be a Mediterranean dish, probably some fish and calamari.
Okay. I'm with it. All right, Miguel, let everybody know where they can connect with you, where they can find you.
Yeah, so very simple on YouTube. That's where most people find us. Just search up CFS Recovery. I have over 2,000 videos covering almost any situation when it comes to CFS, or long COVID, fibromyalgia, everything from hot symptoms to brain fog to how to expand activity without crashing and overdoing it. So pretty much just go check out the channel. We also have over 100 hours of recovery stories of people sharing their transformations. So lots of content out there for you guys to soak up if you feel like you could use some help. But CFS Recovery on YouTube.
All right, y'all. It's been another amazing episode of the Empire Plays, Empire Lives podcast. If today's conversation is such a powerful reminder that your body is not the enemy, your symptoms are not your identity, and your story is not over. Sometimes the body interrupts the life we built because it's inviting us to create one that actually supports us. So you learned how to survive, but now it's time to learn how to stay connected to yourself. Keep creating empowered plates so you can create an empowered life. Y'all check out forwardvibrations.me. Get connected, subscribe to the channel. And if you listen on your favorite podcast distribution platform, give the show a rating and a follow. It's your Healthy Habits and Lifestyle Coach, Jovonnie. Thanks for vibing with me, y'all.